Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, and back with me, of course, Little Blue. Yes, now the time has come. And especially because, well, a little bit of a trivia for you, to recap, because after the disappointing failure of Batman and Robin, because Warner Brothers just put Batman to rest, from doing any other live action films, and yeah. And here's another thing, because do you recall whatever Batman films they had planned after Batman Robin, but then got canceled? Do you know that?
I do not.
Okay. Well, I think we've heard there was going to be a spin-off or something, but of course it got canceled.
Well, with the failure of, this is no slam toward Joel Schumacher, the late Joel Schumacher.
Yes.
But after the failure of those films, in walks a man named Christopher Nolan.
Yes.
Who was a little-known director at the time, had done some projects, and comes in with his vision of the Batman and the Dark Knight. And from what we now know as the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins,
Yeah.
the Dark Knight, and the Dark Knight Rises.
Right. Right. And just very quickly, you can just quickly answer this question when I say this. Just quickly say this, make it smaller. But because I have to ask, because this is a question, and for you to know, and because of what you said about George Clooney's Batman, and because of the last Batman we had at that time was George Clooney, and we both have said that we think that George Clooney was a good Batman.
I just had this conversation with someone not more than an hour ago about George Clooney as Batman. The person I was talking to said they did not care for him as Batman. I said I actually thought he made a good Batman, but the script was so horrible that he couldn't do it justice. There was no way he could.
Exactly. It could have been a whole lot better, and with him as Batman,
He was a good Batman, no question about it. But, again, when you have a poor script, there's no amount of good acting that's going to help move it. And I think that's proven from the fact that you had some major stars in that movie: Uma Thurman, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. Big name stars don't always carry a film. If it's a poor script to begin with and a poor storyline, it's never going to go anywhere.
Yep.
Too many villains.
Yeah.
Too many villains. But when Batman Begins started, you had a very real sense of what Batman would be if he were a real life character.
Yeah.
It didn't. The movies, and I'll say all three of them, but we're concentrating on Batman Begins right now.
Yeah. Batman
Begins
did
not insult your intelligence at all.
Right.
Everything was well explained. There was a background story. There was motivation for Bruce Wayne to become Batman. He had the means. He had the money. He had the skill set to do what needed to be done. And as you're watching this trilogy, you're thinking, if a guy had just off the charts martial arts skills and the money and the technology, he could pull Batman off.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
But Batman Begins takes you to the very beginning, which we hadn't really seen an origin story before, not on film.
Well,
Batman.
I mean, there was a little, as I recall, there was just a small portion of it, saying Batman Forever.
There was.
Here's this. In Tim Burton's Batman, we of course see the origin of Bruce Wayne's parents being murdered, and in Batman Forever, we see how Bruce Wayne became Batman.
Right. You have the backstory. You have the explanation of the League of Shadows.
All of it.
Ra's al Ghul. This character Dukat that turned out to be Ra's al Ghul, who had a dual identity to protect his identity.
And need we say that, Dukat, but of course would be known as Ra's al Ghul, played by the one and only Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson, yeah. Before that, like, he was also best known for in Schindler's List and Qui-Gon Jinn in Phantom Menace.
And Liam Neeson has a presence on screen that just dominates.
Oh, yeah.
He had his character was very powerful in that movie. I don't think they could have gotten anyone better to play that role other than Liam Neeson.
Oh, yes.
But we see the origins of Batman. We see his plunge into the criminal underworld to learn what it's like to be a criminal. And you see him reflecting when he's talking to Ra's al Ghul. He never became a criminal, but he got a taste of it. He knew what it was like to be a criminal. And he wanted to find out what made criminals tick. He found out it was, in a lot of cases, it was desperation. It was survival. Going into survival mode that he had to do day to day when he was living on the street. And you see that, and you see his criminology just expand on the experience he had as living in the criminal underworld.
Yep. And also, because some of the other characters, like there's, of course, Michael Caine as Alfred Pennyworth.
Absolute perfect casting for that role.
Oh, yes. And also, another great casting, Gary Oldman as Commissioner James Gordon.
Again, more perfect casting for that role. It was fantastic.
Yep.
Gary Oldman, I'm a big fan of Gary Oldman. He's a very versatile actor. I dare say he's a method actor. He becomes the character that he portrays, and he immersed himself in that role. He was so good as Commissioner Gordon.
Oh, yes. And to think, because, like, other roles that he was doing, like, he was in Fifth Element, and a year before Batman Begins, he was Sirius Black in Harry Potter.
Exactly. His role from Sirius Black to, they're diverse, they're different. You can't really call him a character actor because he becomes a different person when he is on screen as that character he portrays.
Yes.
But you see how his character starts to develop a bond with Batman. There's mistrust at first. He's unsure, but as time goes by, he begins to see that Batman is there to help.
Yep.
And a friendship is forged. And it's so great to see that, the beginnings of that, and how that foundation is laid for the other two films.
Yep. And also, because of the other characters, like there's Rachel, for example. I guess in Batman Begins, like, Bruce's love interest.
Right. Rachel we see in the very beginning, she and Bruce as children, as the movie opens.
Yeah.
And he falls into the well and discovers this cavern where all these bats are. He encounters the bat, scares him, and he develops a fear of bats. But then he overcomes that fear later on when he joins the League of Shadows to go through the training, and he faces his fears. Then he turns his fear on his opponent. That is such a great spin on that story of how he becomes the Batman.
Oh, yes. Yep. And also, because I'm trying to remember, and also this was the live action debut of Dr. Crane / Scarecrow.
Yes, the actor is amazing, and you'll have to help me out. The name of the actor that plays.
I can't remember the name either. I'm sorry.
I've seen him in other films. He's a fantastic actor.
And he's worked with Christopher Nolan a couple of other times. Maybe he's kind of Christopher Nolan's lucky charm, I guess.
Yes, he's very much a character actor. His personality is pretty much the same with any role he plays, but that's appealing. Just like
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with him.
And fun fact, what's his face, who was Scarecrow, he did at one point audition for Batman / Bruce Wayne.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
That I did not know.
Uh-huh. And like, well, from the audition tapes of both him and Christian Bale, they were in I think it was one of George Clooney's bat suits that they were for the auditions.
Christian Bale was the perfect Batman, in my opinion.
Oh yes.
Uh,
Yeah, we of course we have to talk about his Batman, so
his Batman, which had the rule, he had the no kill rule. He would not kill.
yeah.
But he would maim.
But there are a few times, but actually, like from like say Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck, their Batmans did at times kill a few people.
Yeah, they would kill the bad
I
guy.
think it's kind of I just wanted to say I think it's kind of mutual for Batman, killing and not killing.
It's if it becomes necessary,
Yeah.
he will.
When need to kill the bad guy.
But I think for the most part, the Christian Bale's version of Batman is much more. He is an incorruptible character. Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy is incorruptible.
Yes.
Even as the Joker says in Dark Knight, he is truly incorruptible. And part of that is the death of his parents and seeing what his father did, what his parents did
Yeah.
to try to help Gotham, and then what death does.
Mm-hmm.
The fallout from death, what it causes. He wanted no part of it. And even if it meant killing his enemy, he refused to do it.
Yeah. Yep. So there's that, and also Morgan Freeman, who's Lucius Fox in this. We almost forgot to mention him.
Couldn't be more perfect in that role.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Morgan Freeman fan. I watched him when he was on a show called The Electric Company on
Oh yes.
PBS years and years ago, and I loved him then. And he went through a lot of personal problems. I think drug addiction and other things, and he really turned around and is just a fantastic actor.
Yes. And I especially that sequence where they're trying out where Bruce Wayne is like test driving the tumbler,
Yes, when we see Bruce Wayne's introduction to what would become Batman's equipment, the tumbler, which would become the Batmobile, although it's never referred to in any of those movies as the Batmobile, which I like. Although the escape pod, the cycle, is called the Bat Pod.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The tumbler is always referred to as the tumbler. Then when we get in Dark Knight Rises, the aircraft, the type helicopter that Batman flies is known as that Lucius Fox had named he names it the Bat.
Yeah. But anyways, so that sequence where like Bruce Wayne's test driving the tumbler, and I think if you notice, like I think Lucius is kind of getting nervous because of how Bruce Wayne's driving it.
Yeah, and his explanation of why the tumbler was built, everything is explained. I go back to that. The reason this Dark Knight trilogy is so successful, everything is explained and explained clearly, so you understand where every character is coming from. You understand the origins of everything Batman uses, so the audience intelligence is never insulted.
Mm-hmm.
With the explanation of why he looks the way he looks, what the equipment he uses, it's all, okay, I get that. I get it. There's nothing taken on faith, and it's really difficult, even though Batman is a comic book character, you pretty much take it on faith in that respect. But when the writers and the director go to the lengths of explaining everything, you just appreciate it that much more. And you walk out of the movie thinking, you know what?
Yeah.
That was a great movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't walk out saying, oh, man, I can't believe they did this, or I can't believe they did that. There was none of that in any of the Dark Knight movies. None of it.
Nope. And some other stuff, like, oh yeah, those moments were like, well, for example, like when Scarecrow would use his gas, you know, and mess with people's minds, their vision.
Again, very well explained. The origins of that gas come from that flower on the I think he said it was on the eastern slope of that mountain where they grew, and they extracted that compound from that flower that was an hallucinogen that caused them to just see things, which is how Scarecrow, Dr. Crane, controlled his patients.
Yeah, and also. Yeah, another thing, like Batman, we first see Batman and him fighting some of the men, and when he breaks out, he like breaks on top of the car and like, you know, says, "I'm Batman."
That was one of the cool that part, that scene when you first see him as Batman literally took my breath away in the theater when I saw it.
Yeah.
When the gangster.
Yeah, him.
The character's name. I know the character's name, and I can't remember it. But when he's like, you know, who are you?
Yeah, because like he's like preparing his gun. He's just like, you know, what the hell are you? And of course, Batman breaks the car up top of the car window and says, "I'm Batman," and he knocks him, like he hits him on the head, and yeah.
And knocks him out, yeah. Knocks him out cold. So.
And that's when we see. Well, that's when we see him. He tied him up to, like, you know, a searchlight, you know.
Carmine Falcone is the name. He's the crime boss.
Yeah. So at first, Batman tied him to a searchlight and making the sign of the bat.
Exactly. And his character wasn't over the top. You know, he didn't wear a weird costume or anything. You know, we expect that with a Joker. But with someone like Carmine Falcone, he's got to be a straight guy. He's got to come across as a tough mob boss, which is what he is. And it was well played.
And remember, like, earlier in the film, and when, you know, we with Bruce Wayne down there, like, there's at one point he gave a homeless guy his coat, you know.
Exactly.
And then, and when he's Batman, and right after he knocks him unconscious, what's the gangster's name? The boss.
Carmine Falcone.
When he knocks out Falcone, he notices the same guy where he gave his coat, and of course Batman says to him, "Nice coat." Then he goes up in the air, and then the guy says, "Thanks." So.
Yeah, exactly. And you're seeing that guy. It's like 7 years later, after he left.
Right.
Gotham, after he ran away, basically fled Gotham, and went into the criminal underworld. So now he's back as Batman to, you know, exact justice.
Right.
On the corruption in Gotham, and he sees that coat, and so you see that interaction again. It's really funny.
Exactly.
But as you get into the movie, as you get farther in, and you find out what's really happening, we find out obviously that this man that's played by Liam Neeson, Ducat, is actually Ra's al Ghul.
Yes.
Because he thought that he had killed Ra's al Ghul. But the man that he had killed was a figurehead, you know, disguised as Ra's al Ghul. But Ra's al Ghul was with him the whole time.
Right. And other things I want to mention, like, remember that sequence where, like, Bruce and other guests with him, they're at that restaurant, you know?
Yes.
Did he actually, like, at one point buy that restaurant?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and even, like, say he had two girls with him, and they were in that pool that was a decoration, you know that part?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's another thing. Bruce Wayne, there are different kind of versions of Bruce Wayne. One is where, like, when he was not in Gotham anymore and, like, he was, you know, being trained and such. The other Bruce is, well, him just being a show-off and, you know, because he's a millionaire, and then the other Bruce is when he's Batman, if you know what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yep, and also trying to remember do you remember like also there was that little boy who popped up a couple times and was stuck with Rachel.
Yeah, he did. He popped up, but he met the Batman in the Narrows, and he says, my friends will never believe me that I actually saw you, and he gives him that scope that he was using, and then later on he gets hooked up with Rachel Dawes, and she's protecting him, and he sees Batman again, and it's just one of those where they cross over. There's characters where they cross over, just like the man with the coat.
Exactly. Yeah. And here's another thing. And what's his face? That big fat guy who was working alongside with Commissioner Gordon. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that
Who
is,
he too was a jerk as well.
he was corrupt. He was in the pocket of Carmine Falcone, and he
Right.
was a corrupt cop. He was getting paid off on the side.
Well, just like say in Tim Burton's Batman, how Eckhart was same thing. He was with the gangs. He was with the mob. And on Jack Napier's side.
Right. But Batman gets him.
I know because I obviously we're talking. We know of course we have to talk about that sequence where he terrifies him and gets him to talk.
He sets the trap. He goes by this street vendor, gets falafel, and then he steals money out of his bin. And he says, "I got kids to feed." And he says, "What? They don't like falafel?" And he just kind of chuckles, and walks on because he's a big man. He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
He's got power.
It's where like after he says that, it just makes you want to say, "What a butthole!" Just what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. He's a total jerk, totally arrogant, and thinks he's above the law.
Yeah.
Because he is the law, but he gets away with it because he's in the pocket he's in Carmine Falcone's pocket.
Yeah.
So Batman sets the trap. He gets his foot snared, pulls him, yanks him up,
and while it's raining.
While it's raining, and just roars at him, scares
because
him to
like
death.
because where were the other drugs? And just
Yeah, I never knew.
And then
swear to God,
and then
swear to me.
yeah, I was gonna say that line. Swear to me.
And that to me, of any superhero movie, and it's just my opinion, of any superhero movie I have ever seen in my life, I'm talking any Marvel movie,
any DC film as well.
That is the most powerful scene of any I have ever seen because you see, of course, I'm partial to Batman anyway, but
Yeah.
you see Batman at his best, terrorizing the bad guy.
Yeah.
Intimidating and terrorizing him, striking fear into his heart, and that's what he does in that scene.
And I was gonna say another good line from Batman, because do I look like a cop?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And also a couple of other scenes, like remember because when Batman is trying to confront Scarecrow, Batman gets a whip of Scarecrow's gas.
Yes.
Yeah, that was an intense scene. And when at one point Rachel's poisoned, correct?
That's true.
And this is the only, and I'm gonna go ahead and say this. This is the only time that that's in the Dark Knight trilogy, because Batman summons backup, which are a swarm of bats. So,
exactly.
Yeah, and that's when we get the infamous Tumblr chase sequence, and like Commissioner Gordon mentions that that will take Rachel. He'll bring Rachel to his car, and then Batman shouts, "I brought mine and yours," and Tumblr activates and drives off, and Commissioner Gordon's like, "I gotta get me one of those," and even the police are wondering because he's in a tank, and black tank, and Tumblr getting away and eventually getting to the Bat Cave. I mean, even though it's not really called the Bat Cave, it's still the cave. Even though it's not called the Bat Cave in the Dark Knight trilogy. Okay, so what? I would still call it the Bat Cave, but And even at one point, I think, yeah, Alfred is a bit disappointed with Bruce Wayne, and because it's happened that happened like on the evening because well, people were at his mansion like because today was his birthday, so yeah, and that's when Ra's al Ghul shows up, and chaos happens. Like Bruce Wayne has everybody, the guests leave his mansion, and that's when chaos happens. Disaster happens, I should say, but both. And the Wayne Manor just burns down, and yeah, and Bruce Wayne just I think unconscious, and Alfred saves him, and yeah, and you got anything to say, Lil Blue?
No, I mean I'm right with you on all of it. Just
Okay.
listen.
Okay. And also, that moment in the film, well, when. Oh, yeah, here's another thing I forgot to mention. Before the tumbler chase, like, Batman, like, confronted Dr. Crane for sure, and Dr. Crane got a taste of his own medicine, you know?
Exactly.
Yep. And that whole sequence where Ra's al Ghul and his men, they pretty much have the entire city hostage and with the gas that they summon.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That was when you see the magnitude of that gas, and you realize that item that was stolen from Wayne Enterprises that dispersed that caused it was designed to evaporate or vaporize an enemy's water supply,
Yeah.
and they realized that this gas can be created from it's been poured into the water supply, and when this machine is turned on, it vaporizes the water and releases this gas, and basically drives everyone in Gotham crazy until they just kill each other.
Yeah.
And it drives them into paranoia, and so you see the magnitude of this thing, what's happening, and Batman has to stop it, and it's really left up to him and Commissioner Gordon to stop it.
Yep, exactly. And yeah, even Commissioner Gordon gets to drive and like take control of the tumbler.
Yeah, and he finally figures it out, and he ends up blowing up one of the piers that holds up
The monorail.
the monorail train, and it gives Batman the chance to face down Ra's al Ghul one last time, and he tells him, he says, I don't, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you.
Exactly, and I was going to mention that. Yeah, and of course, Ra's al Ghul's defeat, of course, when the monorail crashes.
Right.
Yeah, and also like Scarecrow's defeat. Well, because he's on the horse, and then Rachel zaps Crane with the taser right in the face.
Exactly.
And Batman gives away his identity to Rachel.
Right.
Yeah. Do you remember the words he says that's when she finds out?
Yeah, he says someone once told me it's not who you are. It's not who you are that defines you, but what you do.
Right.
And then she realizes it's Bruce.
Right. So, and I mean, because why exactly did Bruce let Rachel know it was him? Was there a reasoning?
Because he loved her, and he really wanted her to know that he was not the person, the billionaire playboy that she took him for. Because
right.
Remember when she sees him when he comes back, he's walking with these two girls, and he's wet, where he's been swimming, and he's going out to his Lamborghini, and and she's just like, you're underneath. You'll always, he's trying to tell her, I am more. And she really doesn't believe. She just sees him for what he is on the surface. She doesn't realize it's a cover. But he lets her in on the secret because he loves her, and he wants her to know that he has really changed. And he knows there's a risk that he could be killed.
Yep, exactly. And also, oh man, I forgot to mention this. Like, going back very earlier in the film, because Bruce Wayne's parents' murderer, like we see him, and at that one point he is arrested, but then he is killed.
Exactly.
Yeah, and even like say Commissioner Gordon, like he knew, of course, he was there the whole time, you know, as a policeman, and got to know Bruce when he was a kid.
Right. And I think overall, you know, and of course, Batman and Commissioner Gordon saved the day.
Yes, they did. They both become the hero. They both become the heroes on that day.
Right, and we see that, you know, when it wraps up, we see, of course, Rachel, you know, she tells Bruce when he's trying to, you know, he's going to have to rebuild Wayne Manor because Ra's al Ghul and his goons set it on fire. But
burned it to the
she
ground.
tells him, you know, that he came back, you know, his mask, and she said, you know, this is your mask. She says, maybe someday Gotham won't need Batman. And so there's hope there, but she's basically telling Bruce, you know, I'm not ready for this. I don't want this. You know, I love Bruce Wayne, not the person you've become. And maybe someday when Batman is no longer needed, then you'll come back. So he has to face that fact, you know, that he can't have her and be Batman. But we, you know, then of course we see the final scene where Batman meets, you know, Lieutenant Gordon. He's been promoted from sergeant to lieutenant, and shows him the Joker card, which is the lead into Dark Knight, of course.
Yeah. And why did he go back from being lieutenant? Like, you know.
Well, he had been a sergeant. So with how he helped save the city, the police commissioner promoted him to lieutenant.
Oh, okay.
So he got a promotion out of it.
Well, shouldn't lieutenant come first and then sergeant? I'm a bit confused. Like.
No. Sergeant is basically, if you're in the military, sergeant major is as high as you can go as an enlisted man. If you're a commissioned officer, you can go all the way up to general.
Right.
But in the police department, you can be promoted, you know, without a commission. In other words, you can be a commissioned officer without, you know, formal training or anything. You can do it on tenure alone and experience. So he is rewarded for his tenure and his helping to save Gotham, and he's promoted from sergeant to lieutenant.
Yeah, and then the final scene of Batman Begins, a tease of what was to come next.
Exactly, which is again where he and Commissioner Gordon are meeting on that rooftop when he shows him the bat signal, and then he shows him the Joker card.
Yep.
And I love the last line because he says, "I never did say thank you," and he said, "And you'll never have to." And then he jumps off the roof, and that's it.
Oh, so, yes.
I got to say, I mean, I'll just, before you even ask, I'll already tell you, 5 stars for me.
Yeah.
That movie was just a fantastic beginning for Batman and set the tone for the other 2 films.
Yeah, and one more thing, because about the film, like, if you could tell, like, I feel as though that there's a slight, slight difference with the look of Gotham City, like in this and in the next 2 Batman films. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a slightly different feel. There's a lot more.
Yeah.
You have more. Dark Knight is much more intense. Dark Knight Rises is more. There's much more isolation. You feel the isolation in Dark Knight Rises. You feel the isolation and the desperation. In Dark Knight, there's a sense of dread. There's a sense of fear and anxiousness and anxiety of what's going to happen next.
Oh yes.
And it's all driven by the Joker. By Heath Ledger's portrayal as the Joker.
Yep. Which, as you know, that's what we're going to review next. So we have that to look forward to. So again, you give it 5 stars?
Yes.
I'll give this, why not? I'll give this a 10 out of 10. So, yep, so that's that on our review of Batman Begins. Any last words?
I must be off.
He says that. For me, we hope you enjoyed our review of Batman Begins. More reviews coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward. And we'll see you guys in the next video/review. And again, as I said, The Dark Knight is next. Take care, and peace out.